Welcome to the Empowered to Connect podcast, where we come together to discuss a healing-centered approach to engagement and well-being for ourselves, our families, and our communities. I'm your host, JD Wilson, and oh man, today on the show, we've got one of my favorite people on earth. It's Miss Jacque Rowe Fields. Jacque is an administrator at the Soulsville School here in Memphis, local charter high school, and she has been in education for her whole career, and her stops have been at higher ed, private institutions, at public elementary institutions, public middle schools as well. So she has been in a variety of different places. Jacque and I met years ago working at the same elementary school here in town. And one of the things that drew me to her initially as a friend was this, that we had some of the best discussions I've ever had in my entire life with a very diverse group of people. And Jacque navigated those conversations really brilliantly. I would watch her every year at teacher trainings or just really holding court in the front office with whoever was around, at being able to help both parents, students, teachers, and other adults that worked in the school navigate really tough discussions with a lot of skill. So we wanted to have Jacque on today to talk about how we do that, how we navigate some of these hard conversations. And one of the things that came out of this conversation was the valuable art of unlearning, the need to unlearn some things in our own lives and how we go about doing that. It's a great discussion, a great conversation. You'll hear us pick up in kind of mid-conversation and really right out of the gate, I tell one of the most embarrassing stories of my life. So you'll have that to look forward to. Jacque is a great guest on the show. We'll hope to have her on in the future as well. Really fun interview today. Can't wait for you to hear it. It's Miss Jacque Rowe Fields. One of the things that is needed is for everyone to be, mutual listeners and learners of each other. If I could use this moment to tell this story that really pivoted this for me, I had a bunch of head knowledge, a bunch of information, and again, like I said, I grew up in Atlanta, so I had a lot of friends who looked different than me and had different cultural traditions than me, but I had not really had much experience in different socioeconomic situations, and so one of my first days working in the neighborhood. I am on the phone with the volunteer, and I'm trying to get birthday celebrations set up for classrooms for the school. So I thought, hey, let's have volunteers come in and they can bring cake and ice cream and stuff, and we'll do birthday celebrations one day a month for everybody in that class, because that learning time can't get interrupted, and we want to make sure that we don't have celebrations 10 days a month. We only want to have one, but let's make it count. It was coming from, I think, a good place mostly, but Jacque heard me on the phone having this conversation, and one of the things that I said to one of the volunteers was, it's just really important for us to make these kids feel like $1 million on their birthday, and they might never have another moment that for some of these kids, they might not have anybody celebrate them on their birthday if we don't do this in this class. So let's make sure that we are there to celebrate them for that. And even as I'm telling the story, I'm mortified all over again, and I want to crawl in a hole and delete this and turn it off and stop recording. But
thank you for your vulnerability, JD. Thank you. Come along. You're doing awesome.
And I didn't see Jackie's face while I was saying it, thank God. But I turned afterward, and to make what we can now laugh about, a serious moment for a second, I needed what happened next for a myriad of reasons in my life. But the graciousness that Jacque showed to me literally changed the course of my understanding of how these things need to happen, how these conversations need to happen. So Jacque turned and said, hey, JD, I just want to challenge something that you said. You I don't know that you spent much time in a neighborhood like this before, have you? It's like,
oh, no.
No? Matter of fact, no, I haven't. And she said, I think what you're going to realize is that here in the hood, birthdays are like the Super Bowl. Like, people celebrate their kids now. Like people celebrate their kids really, really well. And she just explained it to me really graciously. And I wanted to crawl in a hole. Jacque, will you kind of tell that story from your perspective of like hearing me on the phone and not choking me out, but like having a conversation instead?
So first of all, Tana, what you need to know is I wasn't eavesdropping on the conversation, okay?
And if you were, I think that might have been all right.
Yeah, licensed.
We worked in a common space. So, imagine kind of like, a call center or something where it's just a room full of desks, Yeah. So, and I think it was JD, myself, Karen Bricky, Weisinger, and maybe Patricia Burns was in there, but the office space was filled with people. And JD was doing his thing, and he did. I remember him, being so excited and passionate about these birthdays and, getting the volunteers all fired up. And to be fair to JD, he was touching, the soft spot, right? I mean,
yeah.
he was selling it in a way that was going to get everyone on the bandwagon. So because they were probably very like-minded. And Miss Jacque, with her little lifetime mantra of no microaggression goes unchecked.
There we go.
I turned to JD and did I say, let me challenge you, JD? Or did I say, let me push you a little? Something to that nature, right?
The phrase was, let me challenge you on something, because that phrase has stuck in my brain. And if I had to have hard conversations, it is not natural for me to have easy entryway into those conversations. And so I have used that phrase 1,000 times since then.
Let me challenge you on something. So that sounds very much like a Jacque Roweism. And so for me, the idea wasn't so much of, did you know that people celebrate birthdays? What I was trying to get you to realize is that the assumption you were making, you were painting with a huge broad brush, and you hadn't even deserved to hold the brush in your hand.
That's right.
And so I think that's always the goal, is just to get people to check where that assumption comes from, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
That's what we do. I do it all the time. I do it all the time. You come out of something you think automatically, for which you have no basis for in many cases.
And
I think that harks back to that learning and unlearning that you were talking about a little bit earlier when I was asking about the name of that conference, right? Because it's I personally feel like for me, it's easy to learn some things. It's really the challenge for me is unlearning those implicit biases that are just deeply embedded in me because of who I am, where I grew up, the people I grew up around, the language that was used, the posture that was used. It's a lift. It's a lift to be humble enough to unlearn and to be willing to be challenged. I love the let no microaggression go unchecked. I've got to figure out how you have patience, Miss Jacque, to live by that mantra. That's a huge mantra.
Tana, it's really a calling, I think. To be honest with you, I really think that I was placed. We were talking about, who are you and why are you here? I really believe that is an important part of my purpose here, is because I'm able to enter those conversations with people and walk with them. Because Tana, it's tough. I mean, you talk about gnashing of teeth and shedding of tears. I've held a lot of hands while people stare at themselves in the mirror. And I really know it's just got to be, the grace of God and the Holy Spirit helping me through those kinds of situations with people.
And Jacque, for those who don't have a Miss Jacque to hold their hand and to shove them toward the edge they need to walk off of, maybe not shove, more like a
invite them to the edge too.
Right? For those people who don't have, I'm thinking about folks who are right now self-examining and going, I know I need to have these conversations. I don't even know where I need to start with this conversation. How do you have any advice for people who are just looking in the mirror for the first time, and how can they begin this process of unlearning the and Jackie, if you will, speak to folks on all the ends of the spectrum here, not just white people or white straight Christian people from a Reformed tradition, but like anybody who might be listening from any different background. Like, how do you start that process?
Yeah, I'm glad you cast the net a little bit wider because truly we all have things that are deep and embedded in our psyche that we need to unlearn. And that comes from classism, it could be racism, gender bias. I am a woman of wisdom now, as I like to say. I'm a seasoned saint. And so ageism comes into play. There's no shortage of isms, right? We all have so many different kinds of isms that we can subscribe to.
Totally.
But the first thing I think is harken back to what Tana said. You've got to actually first realize that you need to do some work. And so once you come to a space where you say, hey, I realize some of the stuff that I'm thinking might be a little bit jacked up. When you get to that place, you're going to have to really be patient with yourself. And I think people want to automatically fix it. You read one book and you're done. And my advice to you is, brother and sister, it does not work like that. It is a daily process. You're not going to be one and done. The other advice I would have is, don't pick someone, let someone pick you. So, and what do I mean by that? JD, you didn't come to me and say, Miss Jackie, hey, could you walk alongside me because I'm here in the hood now and
Miss
you're
Jackie,
Black.
Teach
And
me.
I don't know what I'm doing.
Teach me about the hood, Miss Jackie.
Yeah. But my advice is that for those people who are trying to grow is to be their authentic self, be vulnerable in a public space, and someone who is like a Miss Jackie will then come alongside and partner you. There are people out there who are willing and able, because some people might be willing but not able, to walk that journey together with people who are growing. And I've learned, JD, just as much from you as you think you've learned from me. Whatever you think you've learned from me, I've learned just as much.
Doubt it.
And so, it's reciprocal.
Yeah, that's really good.
I love it.
Man. Last thought, Miss Jackie. So a lot of folks are coming to ETC from the get-go for parenting advice. They're in a place of needing some help parenting, and someone recommends them to come check out Empowered to Connect. And so a story you told me the other day about a conversation with your kids, I thought was really important. Will you talk with us about how have you had these conversations with your kids over time? And will you kind of finish by telling the story of what you asked them, the question you asked them the other day in light of everything happening in the world right now?
Sure thing. So let me start with that because a few weeks ago, my sister, Tracy Rowe, who does, she goes live on Facebook during lunchtime, and she's connected to the Red Table Talk with Jada Pinkett Smith. And so she does a really fun conversation from like 11:30 to 12:30 on Facebook Live. Tracy Rowe, go check her out, you guys.
Yeah, we'll link her in the show notes.
So Tracy had me on her live show to talk about parenting during this, really difficult time of unrest. And she wanted to know what kind of conversations I've had with my own biological children, having 3 adult men that I've raised from a little seedling. And I went to them and asked them, what had I taught them about being Black and living in America? As what as an African American male did I give them that helps them succeed here? And what do they wish I had given them? What was missing in their experience that they're like, gee, Mom, I wish you had told us this. And so I got some really interesting comments from all five of them about, I had done a great job helping them see what racism would look like, the actual kinds of in your faces kinds of comments that you might get along the way. We lived in a predominantly white neighborhood in Grand Rapids. It was actually Granville, Michigan. They went to a predominantly white high school and school. And so certainly, inevitably they were going to have to face some things, and I had kind of prepped them for that. But what I got over and over again is I didn't give them the what to do next. Yeah. And I was like, wow, you're right, because I don't know sometimes what to do next myself,
Right.
And there were certain things in our family that, things that were unacceptable. You're not going to hit a person, you're not going to start a fight, that kind of thing. Like,
Right.
no initiated violence. Now, I would tell them all, you have a right to defend yourself, but fighting is not something that was allowed. I didn't even want my own children to be, tussling with each other.
Right. Right.
So they were like, we had those things, but we didn't quite know what to do when they happened. And then, the instructions would be, you reach out to an adult, a teacher or a principal, but oftentimes those people visibly looked like they were also part of the problem. So we just didn't really know where to go in the establishment with that. And
Oh man.
boy, I'm going to tell you, that hit me like a ton of bricks. I was like, that is really deep. How do we prepare young people for the response? And my children are African American, but all children, if we want to switch to a society where this is unacceptable, then we all need to be prepared, right?
Yes.
Yeah, everyone has to be prepared. If they encounter one of those aggressions, how do we react? And so that was really eye-opening for me. And I've really been thinking about that a lot, because I still have a lot of conversations, especially with educators, about, how do we identify it in ourselves? But Tana, you'll relate to this. We talk about, in terms of behavior, if you're going to try and address a negative behavior, you want to replace that behavior, right? You want to put
That's
something
right.
good in its place, right, Tana?
That's right. That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So if we apply that concept to this kind of negative behavior, what are we doing to put something in its place? And we have to go the second step. We've done some work on identifying it and trying to get you to weed it out, but unless we put something in its place, the weed's just going to grow right back.
Come on.
So for me, I think that's the next phase of my own personal journey. Is I've spent a lifetime now, helping make the invisible visible. That's what I've always said, making the invisible visible. Now I need to figure out, how do I help people plant, good seeds in its place. And that's a tough gig. I'm having a harder time thinking about that than in the past when I've, dealt with something hurtful or hateful. For whatever reason, I've toughened up my skin to be able to face those things. But how do I help you need to put something in its place? That's a harder sell.
Well, and from you having worked over the last couple of years in essentially every level of education in the country, so from 5-year-olds to 22-year-olds,
Yep.
how do you have any starting place for that? Like, what are some of the things that you think maybe parents could start to do at home to help their kids be equipped for those situations?
So I'll tell you again, just this is my own personal story. My belief is that with little kids, we make difference, shameful, and don't point that out. And here's a prime example that I had. I remember my kids in elementary school went to a very diverse elementary school by choice. And we were at a family night, game night. And one of the little kids ran up to hug one of my children and said to their mom, "Mom, this is Brittany. She's my brown friend." And the mom was mortified, understandably, right? We don't do that. And so the mom was like, no, this is just your friend. And she was like, yeah, but she's brown. And the mom tried to take that brown out of that child's mouth. But the reality of it is we shouldn't teach our kids that those differences are negative. We somehow in our society need to understand that those differences are God-given differences and we should be able to celebrate them.
Yes.
And I'm not saying teach children to go around and point out, oh, there's a Hispanic standing over there, and that person's a Black person. Lord knows they're not going to be able to find any Native Americans because I've been looking myself. But
Jacque
that's
Rowe Fields. Jacque.
I'm sorry, unlearned.
Okay, so Miss Jacque, could you rewind in a moment, and if that kiddo had been yours, could you reframe that response? Like, what do you think maybe would have been a good response?
I think that I would say, yes, that is Brittany. And then I would let the brown part just be part of reality. We spend a lot of time teaching our children to be colorblind. And now, thankfully, we understand that colorblind is not the appropriate response, right? We want to see people and truly see them with their brownness and their tanness and their cafe au lateness and their whiteness. We want all of that to be part of the identity. What we have to be careful is that we don't add on the negatives along with that brownness. At that point, that child saw brown as just the truth about who Brittany was. She was brown. She was her friend. She was smart. They liked the same books. They sing together. That was just one more aspect. And so I think I would have just said, yes, hi, little person. So nice to meet you.
And to understand, right, from child development, that's about the right time. They start really articulating those differences. So if we have a fairly solid understanding of child development, that's when they're going to have always noticed it, but maybe start putting some language around it. So I'm hearing you say we don't have to shame it away. We don't have to sort of over celebrate it. Just embrace it as part of what is. Am I hearing you say that correctly?
Yes, you've said it much more eloquently and succinctly than I possibly could because I'm very wordy. But yes.
Well, no, I don't mean it that way. I think my propensity might have been to be like, I know, and isn't she so beautiful? And like I may have in my own uncomfortable, if I'm just really being honest, I may have overdone it, Miss Jacque.
Sure.
And like over celebrated. Because I know I'm not supposed to I'm not supposed to hush them. So it's the task for me is to sort of be calm and let the differences be, if that makes any sense. So I'm having some epiphanies right now, which is why I asked. I'm like, can you reframe that for me? Because I think I may have over responded.
Tana, I think your response is the typical response, right? We swing the pendulum so far.
Right.
Yes, that is a brown person. And guess what? Brown people come in all hues.
I know.
Did you know that President Obama was a brown person too?
Right. We are just a mess. Miss Jacque, we're a mess. We're a hot mess over here.
We are, but that's what we do. That's exactly what we do. We swing the pendulum all the way to the other side and we overcompensate. And that's not a natural response either, but it flows out of our own effort to try to normalize, I guess, is what we're trying to do.
That's right. Yeah. That's good.
Yeah, I love that. I'm sure, Tana, I can think of times if I really strain where I probably have done something very similar,
Yeah, that's good.
I remember years ago, we had a neighbor down the street, Mr. Singh, and Mr. Singh owned a fishing bait shop. And my kids would go down there and buy the crickets, and not because we were going fishing, but just because they were strange and adventurous little kids.
And crickets are fun, said no mother ever.
said no mother ever. So they throw a bag of crickets for Mr. Singh, right? And Mr. Singh, he had a fairly thick accent. He had, he wore the traditional garb. And here I am, Tana, doing exactly what you're describing. I am going the extra mile, okay? For me, though, I've got to like break out the geography. I got to show them like the part of the country where, the part of the world where Mr. Singh is from. And I've got to go in and have a conversation with Mr. Singh. And then, I got to know at least one or two words in whatever Mr. Singh's native language is. That's too much.
Right?
Team too much.
Sometimes we can come on a little too much.
Team too much.
Yeah. And I think we need our children sometimes to sort of look at us with a little side eye, like, you can just take it down a notch, Mom.
Right.
It's a little much right now. Just coming on a little much. That happened to me. I had a story this weekend with one of my teenagers where something happened and I had this visceral, strong response. And I shared it with one of my kids, and they were like, Mom, I think you may not be assuming the best in this situation. I'm like, I think you're probably right. I mean, our kids have so much to teach us, don't they? They just have
really
so much to teach us if we're willing to follow their lead.
They really do. They really do. And I will tell you, as crazy of a time it is as it is right now, this sounds so cliche. I do believe the children are our future.
Yeah, I do. I agree 100%.
I really do. I have great hope and great confidence in our young people to get this right and to do this better than we have. Somehow I feel like I'm in my 50s, so I'm not quite a baby boomer. I just missed it. But my group of folk, we got too comfortable. I think we let the ball drop a little bit, and we can't be comfortable. We have to always be on guard.
Yeah.
That sounds exhausting. I know. But it's so easy for something insidious to creep in if we're not careful.
I want to touch on something you said a second ago. I'm sitting there thinking my response would have been, Tana, exactly what you said, the overdone response, like, going, oh, and their skin's so beautiful, it's so amazing. And we do that with our kids inside the house and talk, we were given advice by a sage, couple friend of ours, the Ottingers, at some point, just to have those conversations early and often within your home about differences, and they're great and to be celebrated and all that. It didn't strike me until you were talking, Jackie, about the preciousness of teaching kids to communicate across differences normally without any filters, as opposed to, being on guard that I've got to drum up this person's differences and making the relationships about the differences instead of allowing the differences to contribute to the relationships.
Mm-hmm. Well said. Again.
That's perfectly said. That's right. I love that.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Well said. Well said. Again, it's exactly what I mean, but more clear and more succinct, JD.
Maybe by the end of this conversation, we'll have it straightened out.
Yes, if we stay on the phone for another, couple of hours, we'll have it all ready.
That's right. We'll work it all out.
But really, JD, honestly, I think that's why, you and I get along so well, and I'm able to relate to people from so many different backgrounds, is because I don't try to pretend like people aren't anything they are,
Yeah.
You're DJ JD, and you and I connected over multiple things.
Right.
But our race wasn't the thing we connected over, but it's the thing that contributes so beautifully to who we are.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That is so true. And I think this idea of the world that we do live in, and especially with the internet neutralizing so many things that used to be geographically separated, the world that we're living in does get to be this beautiful celebration of how unique we all are, and then how unique we all, how uniquely we bring something to the table. And when those uniquenesses become the focal point, it ruins the whole thing. as opposed to us being able to just contribute proudly what we can and then enjoy the contributions of everybody around us. And so I think, going forward, I think in conversations in schools and in communities, like that's a huge, huge starting point, is just being able to appreciate what we all bring to the table.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that. I mean, I relate it to the body, right? So I don't just sit there and look at my hand and go, wow, you are a hand. You are the most amazing hand ever. But I know how important my hand is.
Right.
But I think in your own family, and I'm gonna go back to something you said about as you raise your children, building them up at home and giving them a healthy esteem, a beautiful self-esteem, and seeing themselves as created in God's image, and why that's so important. That's vital. Who said it? Frederick Douglass. It's easier to build strong children than to repair broken men.
Wow.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, totally. Oh, Jacque, we could and probably should talk for another few hours about this. But we'll let you go after the any other things that you want to share with us, or any other thoughts in this conversation before we break out today?
Hey, thank you guys for having me on. Tana, it's so wonderful to sit and talk with you. We've got to do this more often, okay, Tana?
Agreed. Can we please? That
Yeah.
would be my delight. My delight. Thank you, Miss
And
Jacque,
JD,
for coming on.
yeah, it's my pleasure. Love you, JD. Love you, brother. Love you.
Yeah, we love you too, Miss Jacque. Well, we will talk to you soon, and literally probably very soon. We want to have you back on at some point coming up. But thank you so much again for joining us.
Awesome. Continue the incredible work you guys are doing. This is fantastic.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Well, thanks so much again for tuning in today to the Empowered to Connect podcast. What an awesome conversation with Jacque. I hope that you found it helpful. If you did find one thing or two things in particular helpful, we'd love to hear. On our website, you can find on the show page a spot for feedback, and we'd love for you to just share your feedback with us. Let us know what is great, what's awful, and let us know how we can improve. We'd also love to know any topics or material that you'd love to hear. Is there somebody that you'd like to see us interview sometime soon? Let us know. We would love to be able to give the people what they want here on the Power to Connect podcast. So lastly, if you will, on Apple Podcasts, if you will rate and review us, that really does help us to become more visible to those who may be looking for content like this. Thanks to Kyle Wright, our engineer, who is mixing and mastering music for us, as well as Tad Jewett, the creator of our intro and outro music. Thanks to Tana Oninger. Thanks to Jacque Rowe Fields. And we hope to see you soon on the Empowered to Connect podcast.